It's an early morning in the state of Arizona. The NCR's advance on the Legion's capital of Flagstaff has come to a halt. Lanius has sent some of his best commanders and thousands of men to reinforce the Western Front while he focuses on the Fromentary-Praetorian Alliance in the east. General Patrick Keyes, the man in charge of the NCR's attack on northern Arizona, has gathered his best officers to create a plan to break the stalemate. After hours of careful planning, they've come up with a plan they believe will be enough to break the stalemate and seize the Legion's capital once and for all. At 6:20 a.m. local time, NCR vertibirds cross the Legion's lines undetected and drop off members of the 1st Recon Battalion and the elite NCR Rangers. The units have been tasked with setting up positions near the Legion's supply routes. Then at approximately 7:40 a.m., the units are given the signal to begin their attack. They are to harass the Legion's supply lines while the main force pushes forward at the front line. However, this is only a distraction. The goal is to trick the Legion's commanders into thinking a major assault is taking place and thus send more men to reinforce the front. Meanwhile, NCR air assault troops have been deployed to the battle and are closing in on the Flagstaff Airport. The force consists of 10 VB-02 transport vertibirds and one of the newly created VG-01 gunship vertibird. The VG-01 is armed with heavy weaponry, said to be 10 times more powerful than anything a vertibird could carry. It's tasked with flying ahead of the transport vertibirds to destroy any defensive fortifications and cause the enemy to break into panic. However, as it nears the position and begins to fire, it's struck by a surface-to-air missile fired from a man-portable air defense system. Up until this point, the Legion had little to no anti-air capabilities. Lanius strictly prohibited the use of what he considered to be cowardly technology. However, many commanders secretly disobeyed this order. One of these commanders, Legate Octavius Maximus, had gone one step further. Octavius had established a deal with the Texan Brotherhood, in which the Brotherhood agreed to provide Octavius' forces with more advanced weaponry to combat the NCR. One of these weapons was the A-30 Seeker, a Pruorman portable air defense system made to combat Chinese helicopters. Now General Octavius' troops would use them to combat the NCR's vertibirds. As the VG-01 neared the airport, a legionary set up position and fired at the aircraft, successfully landing a hit and disabling it. This information was relayed back to General Keyes himself, as he wanted to personally oversee the assault. His fellow officers pleaded for him to call off the attack before it was too late, but the general was a stubborn man, and he ordered the troops to continue the assault. The transport vertibirds, who were only a few minutes behind the gunship, split into 2 groups and headed to the landing zones designated as backups, in case the airstrip was considered unsafe for landing. However, as the vertibirds neared the landing zone, more missiles were fired from the Legion's ground forces. Multiple vertibirds were shot down in the process, with their crews and passengers being killed instantly or severely wounded. Some, however, did manage to land, and the battle had finally begun. Legion troops quickly made their way to the landing zones. There, they engaged the NCR troops as they exited the vertibirds. The northern landing zone was especially brutal. Some of the men were gunned down as they disembarked from the vertibirds. Others tripped over the bodies of their dead comrades as they attempted to exit the vertibird. The vertibirds were originally intended to stay and provide close air support to the troops, but with the presence of man-pads, this was no longer possible. The troops were now on their own. In the southern landing zone, troops faced less resistance. 3 of the intended 5 vertibirds made it to the landing zone. The squads quickly disembarked and the vertibirds left the scene. They began to make their way to the objective, when all of a sudden they began to take fire. Legion troops were beginning to close in on their position. Members of 1st Squad were the first to make contact. They quickly scrambled for cover and began to return fire. 3rd Squad moved up to reinforce them, while 8th Squad looked to flank the enemy. As 8th Squad moved to flank the enemy, they engaged what they believed to be the enemy. However, this was an error, and they had just shot 4 men from 3rd Squad. They continued to fire on them until they closed in and realized what they had just done. Meanwhile, in the northern landing zone, men of 5th, 10th, and 7th Squad are in a heavy firefight with Legion forces. Sergeant Michael Forrester of 5th Squad is looking to break the stalemate and orders 4 of his men to follow him. The sergeant is attempting to flank the Legion forces. The team manages to do so, and they quickly eliminate multiple Legion soldiers. As they continue to close in on the Legion forces, screams are heard over the radio. Members of 4th Squad are alive and not too far from Sergeant Forrester's position. He takes half of his team with him to try and rescue his fellow troopers, while the other half of the team continues the assault on the Legion forces. The sergeant arrives at 4th Squad's position and engages the nearby Legion forces. They clear a path and reunite with 4th Squad. However, the squad is unable to move quickly enough due to half of 4th Squad being critically injured. The team quickly becomes encircled and they lose any chance of escape. The brave men would continue to fight the Legion forces for the next 28 minutes as they are killed one by one. Back at the southern landing zone, the Legion forces were forced to retreat. The troopers, who only faced minor casualties, continue with the assault. They approach the airport and stop just short of the tree line. They attempt to communicate with the squads from the northern landing zone, but receive no response. 1st Squad volunteers to cross the airport and reunite with the northern landing zone to restore contact between the sides. They will have to cross the airport's runway without being detected, or else they will certainly be slaughtered. When they believe the area is clear, they begin to cross over, but are engaged by an armored vehicle. The vehicle is an NCR-made armored personnel carrier that was captured by the Legion. 4 men from 1st Squad are killed and 2 are critically injured. The surviving 4 men continue on with their mission, while 3rd and 8th Squad continue to engage the vehicle. Men from 3rd Squad want to attempt and rescue the 2 injured troopers from 1st Squad. However, the Legion's APC has them pinned down. One trooper, Corporal Augustine, a former legionary turned trooper, volunteers to attempt and flank the vehicle. He and 2 other troopers make their way across the runway. Corporal Augustine is shot in the leg, but he continues on anyway. They manage to get close to the vehicle and they throw grenades at it, killing the exposed gunner. The men attempt to make their way back to their fellow troopers, but are engaged by a large force of Legion soldiers. Knowing that they could not fight them for long, and that his injury would only hold them back, Corporal Augustine orders the other 2 troopers to return to their squad while he covers. The men manage to escape and Corporal Augustine continues to fight, taking multiple bullet wounds in the process. Eventually he runs out of ammunition and is unable to flee due to his injuries. The Legion troops approach him, with 2 of them recognizing him. The corporal is taken prisoner and would later be found after the battle, dead and mutilated. It was determined that he was tortured and dismembered alive by his former Legion comrades. Back at the North Landing Zone, 5th, 7th, and 10th Squad have managed to repel the attacking Legion forces. They regroup with the surviving members of 1st Squad and make their way to the airport. Both groups have now reached the airport. Their orders are to seize the airport so that VG-02 transport vertibirds can drop off more troops. 10th and 7th Squad clear the parking lot and main buildings. 5th Squad clears the hangars, and 3rd, 8th, and 1st Squad are tasked with securing the northern end of the runway. For the next hour, the troops engage in heavy fighting, but they ultimately manage to successfully secure the airport. Waves of NCR troops are dropped off and phase 1 of the assault is finally over. Out of the 120 air assault troopers that were sent to seize the airport, 90 died, leaving only 30 survivors to tell the tale of what happened at Flagstaff Airport.